Today we're going to talk about antisocial personality disorder. This is one of probably the most misunderstood, but for many of you, the most common mental disorder that you're going to run into. First of all, most of us watching this presentation today are prosocial individuals. We obey the law. And as prosocial individuals, we are the ones that make up the rules and laws of our society. As a result of that, we tend to make up our rules and laws in ways that make sense to us. So for example, I might say that if I didn't obey the law, I'd go to jail, and that might stop me from doing some things wrong. But the research shows that most of those of us who are prosocial will obey the law whether we go to jail or not. And so our idea that somehow putting somebody in jail is going to make them better has some problems. Therefore, we, the prosocial people, don't understand the criminal mind very well, and we really don't understand that the systems that we have aren't always helping the criminal improve himself or herself. So we'd like to go over some of the myths that we have about this. Addicts, people on drugs, as we will see in a little while, over half of our, a large percentage of our antisocial personality population will also fit a diagnosis for addiction. But we believe these people will be taught a lesson by being incarcerated, when in fact most addicts and antisocial personality individuals aren't taught lessons at all by incarceration. If we punish lawbreakers, they will reform themselves. Our training and our research in behavior techniques seems to indicate that unless people know how to act, they won't act in a law-abiding way. Think of training your dog. If you beat your dog up because he leaves landmines on the carpet in your living room, it's not going to do any good unless we begin to reinforce him for positive behavior. The threat of jail or prison will restrain those who would violate our laws. In fact, we have found that in the group of antisocial personality individuals, the threat of jail has almost no impact at all. And the addict or alcoholic and the antisocial individual cannot be treated until he or she is ready. We can force people into treatment, and there's much research that shows that coercion works. So let's look at some characteristics of the criminal population. About 1 in 20 in our society will serve time in prison during their lifetime. I think you've probably, some of you have heard recently that the United States now incarcerates more of its population than any country in the world. I heard a statistic last week that we incarcerate about 1% of our population, more than Turkey, Russia, and even places like Iraq. 59% of inmates had a high school diploma. This is by and large a poorly educated group of people. Fewer than half were sentenced for violent crimes. Approximately half of our prison population, or slightly less, hasn't really hurt anybody or done anything that we would consider violent, nothing to be really afraid of. A fourth were sentenced for property crimes. That would be destruction of something or some other crime that didn't involve other human beings. About a fifth were sentenced for a drug crime. This is the one category of crime that has been on a rapid increase in the last decade. All other violent crime has been falling in the last decade, as you're probably aware. 1/3 reported physical or mental disabilities. 1/3 of the individuals in prison have some form of disability. Let's look at some more of these characteristics. About 62.5 were rearrested for a felony or serious misdemeanor within 3 years of being released. 46% were reconvicted and 41 were reincarcerated. About 36% had been drinking at the time of the offenses. About 41% of the probationers had been drinking. So of the population, those who were purely put on probation were about 40% of those had been drinking at the time of the offense. Between 51% and 79% tested positive for at least one illegal drug. So we have a population, these antisocial personality individuals, who are high-end drug users, and drugs and alcohol are very much a part of this disorder. Let's look at personality disorder generally now. We're going to hone in now more on antisocial personality disorder. But this is generally about all personality disorders. Personality disorder occurs when an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture. This is manifest by at least two of these following four things. Cognition. The thinking of these individuals just is not the same as those of normal people. For example, I had a patient one time stopped by the police. He had 3 DWIs, 2 prior prison terms. He was going to go up for a long time if he was caught. He'd been drinking. He was with his wife in a pickup truck. They were having a huge fight, stopped alongside of the road out on Highway 70 here. He gets out. He's in a big argument with her. A black and white pulls up, and he lays into the cop and says to the cop, "You had no right to stop me. You have no right to interfere in this interaction with my wife." And before we knew it, he was doing the county shuffle. His thinking was not the same as somebody else's. I don't know about you, but me, if a cop stops me and I'm in that state, I'm going to be one of the nicest guys the cop ever met. I'm going to be very cooperative. But then, hopefully, I don't have a personality disorder. Affect. These individuals have varying problems emotionally. And some of them, many of them in fact, are almost dead emotionally, have little or no emotional responses, and when they do have emotional responses, they're restricted to anger or ecstasy. There's not much in between. And some of the other personality disorders may also involve depression and some other emotional responses, but we're looking today primarily at our antisocial personality disordered individuals. These people have difficulty with interpersonal functioning. Their relationships are always in crisis. They also have difficulty with impulse control. I like to say they seek short-term gain for long-term pain. And one of the things that these people need to learn is to experience short-term pain for long-term gain. Now, for all personality disorders, there is a pattern that is inflexible and pervasive. That is, it doesn't change and is present in all areas of their life. It leads to clinically significant distress or impairment. These individuals have trouble getting along with people. They have trouble in their daily lives due to this disorder. There's a stable and long duration that it takes for personality disorder to develop. It can be traced all the way back to adolescence and many times into childhood. It's not the result of another axis 1 diagnosis. For example, the person isn't schizophrenic, isn't in the depths of a horrible depression or some other mental problem that would account for it. Next is, it's not due to direct physiological effects of substances or a medical condition. The person isn't stoned or isn't drunk. This is a state that exists regardless of medical or substance abuse problems. Now we're going to move more specifically to antisocial personality disorder. In antisocial personality disorder, there's a pervasive pattern of disregard and violation for the rights of others occurring since age 15 or younger, indicated by 3 or more of these following things. 3 or more. Number 1, failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors is indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. These individuals don't have to have been arrested. They are breaking the law even though they're not being arrested. They are deceitful, as indicated by repeatedly lying, using aliases, or conning others for personal gain. These individuals tend to use and abuse other people for their own purposes. They're impulsive, fail to plan ahead. I ask my patients that I work with who have antisocial personalities what their plans are for the future. almost without exception, I get the response, I just take it one day at a time. I don't, try to think about the future. I don't know what it's going to be. These individuals do not plan ahead. There's an inability and aggressiveness, an irritability and aggressiveness is indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. This is a violent population. Reckless disregard for the safety of others, of themselves or others. These individuals are very reckless. We're going to have 7 of these. This is the first 5. Remember now, any 3 of these will hit a diagnosis for antisocial personality disorder. Consistent irresponsibility is indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. These individuals tend to be people who try to see what they can get away with. There's a lack of remorse is indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt or mistreated others or stolen from them. There's always a good reason why they've done these things, and it's hardly ever their fault. Now, these individuals are at least 18 years old. We cannot have a personality disorder diagnosis until after the age of 18. In many of the cases, individuals with antisocial personality disorder had an adolescent diagnosis of some conduct disorder, and in some cases of attention deficit disorder. There's evidence of conduct disorder, we said that. The occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during, again, the course of some other mental illness. Now, let's look at some of the causes. Now, I just got these off the research in the last week. There was a study showing that mothers who smoked tend to have a higher incidence of antisocial personality in their children. We are now beginning to believe that there may be, looking at, for example, the example of low serotonin levels, there may be a genetic component in this disorder. Alcoholic fathers of children who were adopted out, those children had a higher level of antisocial personality than the children from homes originating from a father who was not an alcoholic after adoption. So that's interesting. Home violence is often present. Early abuse of the child is often present. Inconsistent discipline and inadequate supervision. We see these kids oftentimes being under-supervised and then at other times being unfairly and punitively disciplined, and there is little or no consistency. And one of the things that occurs when this happens is they begin to see the world as a place that's unfair. And when they see the place as a world that's unfair, they begin to believe that the rules and laws of society don't work for them. And it isn't a very big stretch to go from the society doesn't work for me to the rules don't apply to me, which is where we find them oftentimes in adulthood. In these homes, they were with parents who were self-absorbed or indifferent. And so these are some of the factors that seem to go into the formulation of antisocial personality disorder. And remember, again, we think there's a genetic component. What does this cost? This was a study done in London. Children at the age of 10 exhibiting antisocial antisocial behavior were predicted to cost society 10 times that of normal children by age 28. They cost society about 60,000 pounds. I estimate that's about $120,000 by age 28. So between ages 10 and 28, each of these individuals is costing society approximately, this is a big guesstimate, but approximately $120,000. Without this population, you guys would not have jobs. We wouldn't need locks, we wouldn't need banks, we wouldn't need keys, we wouldn't need car ignitions, police of course, we wouldn't need large court systems, and we wouldn't need prisons. Look at the financial cost that this population levels on society. Now, punishing sanctions may serve to reinforce an already existing identity that's at odds with society. You take an individual like this that feels like the rules don't apply to them. You take an individual like this who doesn't think the way, quote unquote, normal people think, and by putting them in prison, we only convince them that the system is unfair. And when they think the system is unfair, it further pushes them into their antisocial attitudes and behavior. Traditional treatment may merely increase self-esteem in antisocial individuals. Some years ago, a study was done with the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and on the measure of psychopathic deviance, which is kind of a measure of a person's willingness to break the rules, they would put people through self-esteem building and they would develop incredibly good self-esteem. They'd feel really good about themselves, but this measure on the personality test would not shift. They maintained their antisocial behavior in spite of feeling better about themselves. So self-esteem is a waste of time in this population. Shame and guilt are not experienced similarly to normals. You cannot shame this person into being law-abiding. It's not going to bother them if they have a license plate that says I'm an addict. It's not going to bother them if we, in other ways, try to shame them. Many see going to prison as a rite of passage, that they are tough because they've been to prison. And putting them in prison only helps them develop a more antisocial personality disorder. These individuals honestly know their offenses are not their fault. They don't understand the idea of the social contract beyond very simple, basic reciprocity. I do for you, you do for me, you owe me a favor, I owe you a favor. And unfortunately, our court system operates on this low level of moral reasoning. They learn a lot about how to act in prison from our court system. These individuals make decisions on the lowest levels of moral reasoning, seemingly impervious to prevention efforts. They're impulsive, we've already said, unable to forestall immediate pleasure for long-term gain. Now, Robert Hare is one of the experts on this subject, and has done, in fact, one of the best tests for antisocial personality disorder is the Hare test. Antisocial personality disorder clients simply don't believe they have a problem and see no reason to change. They never look back with regret or forward with concern. They perceive themselves as superior beings in a dog-eat-dog world in which they are in competition with others. Hare states that inappropriate programs and interventions inadvertently provide them with excuses and better ways of manipulating others for personal gain. Programs treating antisocial personalities should be cautious in not providing them with excuses for things they've done wrong, such as chemical dependency, abused childhoods, illiteracy. Anytime we allow them an excuse, we further their concept of themselves as antisocial. The focus must be taken from their feelings and wishes to their behavior. We need to deal directly with these individuals from the viewpoint of their behavior. About 5.8% of American males in this study, in other studies it's about 3%, but suffice to say 3 to 5.8% of the male population, about 1% of the female, total of about 3.5% of the population. Now, here's some interesting statistics. Look through these. By and large, antisocial personality individuals have the antisocial personality disorder before they begin abusing drugs. So a very large population, from 33 to 79% of our drug addicts have antisocial personality disorders that predate the substance abuse disorder. So if we're going to treat this population, we need to be treating antisocial personality disorder. And about half of the alcoholics are antisocial. That explains why when we mandate people to go to AA, it oftentimes doesn't work. Their personalities are not such that it's going to work. Okay, legal and family problems were strongly associated with this population. Drinking was associated with the likelihood of more severe abuse when these people became abusive, as opposed to quote-unquote normals who were drinking. So it's a far more violent population. An increased incidence of psychiatric problems in the family of these individuals were associated with this. Substance use disorders were associated with this among these patients as well. In a large meta-analysis, low levels of arousal were found. Now here's another neurological problem that comes up over and over again. These individuals may oftentimes act out for the thrill, to feel anything. Personality traits confer generalized risk for developing a substance disorder, though some of the traits are more strongly linked with some substance disorders than others. But what this study points out is that the personality disorder predates the substance abuse problem. Here's individuals with these disorders. Okay, that's what we said, yes, that many of these dual disorders may be due to early onset of the ASPD. So we find these individuals with substance use disorders and personality disorders. This type of dual diagnosis we oftentimes miss because these individuals, by and large, make us angry, and we don't want to deal with them. Those with, these are a couple interesting studies I found. Individuals with antisocial personality who are HIV positive do not respond as well to the drug therapies as those without. Another indication of the neurological aspect. These individuals do not respond as well to psychotherapy and pharmacologic therapy. Our psychotherapeutic drugs don't work as well with this population. The population that most needs treatment seems invulnerable to our treatment methods. What do we need to do? Effective treatment will include readiness for treatment. In other words, these people need to have an understanding ahead of time of what they're going to be going through and what they're going to be doing. They need to know that they are going to be undergoing treatment and need to be primed to be in treatment. We need to train them behaviorally. Insight will not work with this population. Sitting down and talking about their feelings is a waste of time. We need straight behavior contracts. If you do this, then you will receive that. Skills training. Again, many of these individuals never develop the skills necessary to live normal life in a normal world. I talk to my guys coming out of prison and tell them there are two personalities you have. One is the one you needed to survive in prison. The other is the one you need to survive out here. If you use the one you were using in prison out here, you're not going to make it. You're going to be back in prison. If the one you use in prison is the one you use out here, you're not going to survive in prison. So they have to make this kind of shift in their thinking. Cognitive behavioral methods have shown some effectiveness with this group. That is, changing the way our thinking and our behavior is related. Also, being treated in the community is important, where they know people, where people know them, where their lives can take on some stability. Programs within the criminal justice system. We can be doing some of these cognitive behavioral skills training and behavior training programs within the systems before these people come out. And that's helpful. Here's some public issues. We must fight the public perception that incarceration changes behavior and keeps us safe. It doesn't. We've seen a dramatic drop in crime, but for the last decade or so, California has been increasing their prison population dramatically. Eventually, the pipeline is going to be full and these people are going to be coming out. We are no safer because of what happens to them in prison. In fact, we're probably worse off. Prevention may reach only those who will probably not reoffend. This is something we found in a study in Bernalillo County some years ago with DWI offenders, that those who show up for prevention were those who probably were not going to get DWIs. And the same is true for this population. The kids that we end up working with for prevention are not the kids that need to be reached. Those with the least resources tend to attend, with the best resources tend to attend these prevention activities. We who are given the power to heal must be willing to embrace the darkness of our own souls. We cannot expect to make others make changes, for others to make changes from which we ourselves recoil. Where do we begin? There are no good examples of lasting positive change by those whose primary tool is to punish, blame, or make excuses. This population will not be made better by being blamed and being punished. Minimize and eliminate from your own life blame, excuses, procrastination. As we learn it and we live it, others will catch it from us. It's been great talking to you today. You guys have a good day. Bye now.